So I'm representing Jean-Yves Bezio, and today, welcome to today's webinar. Our host is Valentin Goranko from Stockholm University in Sweden, and please, you may start our webinar. Thank you very much.
Hello. Actually, I'm not the host. I'm only the chair of the talk. And I believe that before the talk, there will be a presentation of the Australian Logic Society by Guillermo. So it's not my turn yet. Am I right? Do I understand it correctly?
So Guillermo is here. Yes.
Yes. Yep, I'm here, Valentin.
Right. So I'm still muting myself. And I'll appear, that is, you'll let me know when you are done.
So, sorry, am I supposed to start already? I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah. Yes, Kim.
Yes, okay. All right. So can I share my screen? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
1 second. Oops. So can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Right. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much for. So should I go? Or?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion.
So thank you very much, everyone, for having me here to give this short presentation to introduce David. And I think that there are very few people in the world that would be most suitable to be introduced by the Australasian Association for Logic than David, given that David is not only a prominent Australian logician, but also his own research interests have intersected quite a bit with the kind of research that has been done in Australia and New Zealand when it comes to logic. So what I'm going to tell you a little bit today is about that research and about the association itself. And I have to confess that I shamelessly copied Valentin's presentation for his association of the Nordic Logic Group because I had no idea how to do this. So let's see how it went. So let me start by saying what the region is. What do we mean by Australasia? Well, roughly we mean this entire part of the world, but in practice, to be completely honest, we, effectively mean Australia and New Zealand just because most of the logic activity takes place in these two countries. But of course, I mean, potentially, if there would be logic activity happening in these other places, we would be very, very happy to have them as well. So what else? The logic tradition in this region. Well, it actually has a bunch of different, at times connected, at times not so connected groups of people working in different topics. For example, we have a very strong tradition in modal logic, and here we have a few colleagues, some deceased, some in other parts of the world. Oh, sorry, I think you lost me because my internet. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. I was just saying that we have here a few examples of people that have historically done modal logic in the region. Some of them are no longer here, like Segerberg, of course, but at some point they were very fundamental and influential figures in the region, and some of them are still around, very much so, such as Lloyd or Max, and in particular, Lloyd is connected a paper together, so it's a good example of a modal logician for the purpose of this particular presentation. And of course, Rob Goldblatt and a bunch of others. On the other hand, we also have a tradition in what you could call sort of more classical mathematical logic. And this would be in the person of John Crossley and his group at Monash. And here we have some sort of offsprings of that kind of group, including Rod Downey, who is a very relevant and important logician in New Zealand. And in particular, once more, John is connected to David because John was David's PhD examiner. So again, another Australasian connection. And then, of course, we also have other people. Unfortunately, this deceased colleague who was very relevant in set theory, or Douglas Bridges, who is well known in the area of constructive mathematics, or Martin Bando in the area of the logic of combinators. And then finally, we have a little bit of a more non-standard tradition, perhaps, but that today have become quite standard, particularly in philosophy, which is when it comes to non-classical logics and substructural logics, paraconsistent logics, relevant logics, and stuff of that nature. And that would be in the person of Richard Rowley. Of course, he's sort of the initiator of this kind of stuff here in Australia, and it went to New Zealand as well. And Bob Meyer, who came in later, but he was a strong collaborator of Rowley. And of course, there are some prominent logicians that came from that kind of school, such as Graham Priest, Greg Restal, Ross Brady, John Slaney, and people of that nature. So now, let me tell you, this is where the region, sorry, I see a hand up there. Rohit has a question, I think. Or maybe not. Oh, well, okay. Okay, well, then I continue. Rohit, I could not hear your question. If there was one, I see your hand raised, but I cannot. So sorry about that. Okay, so then how did the association itself get started? Well, in 1964, right, at the University of New England in Armidale, here in Australia, there was a small meeting organized by these two guys, Richard Rowley and Len Goddard, who was a philosopher, and also had some sort of role creating the association. I mean, relevant at that point, but I guess that he sort of faded out of the field. But they had a meeting and a bunch of people gathered there, around like 20, 22, something like that. But out of that, 25, an hour after that meeting, there was a smaller meeting of 18 people who decided to create some kind of organization in the region that would have an annual conference, and it would sort of represent the interest of logicians in this part of the world. And so in 1965, at the same university, the first conference, the first annual conference of the Association of the Australasian Association for Logic took place, with the president being Len Goddard and Richard Rowley as the secretary. And then, in general, the object statement of the association has been the furtherance of studies in logic, in particular formal logic, history of logic, foundations of mathematics, philosophy of mathematics, and philosophy of logic, and the applications of formal logic to problems in philosophy, computer science, artificial intelligence, and any other appropriate science or technology. So that's very much the goal, and sometimes the location of the conference has varied. From Australia, it has gone to New Zealand, and but most of the time, frankly, it has taken place in Australia, because we try to combine it with some other major conference. I mean, generally in philosophy, with some conferences in artificial intelligence and similar things like that. And of course, out of the list of people that I showed you before, there are a couple that are former presidents of the association, such as Graham, of course, I mean, Rowley at some point, Bob Meyer, Greg, John as well, Martin as well, Lloyd, I think, or well, at the very minimum, Max as well, Sergey as well. So there has been definitely connections with all the three key traditions in the region, within the association. And then more generally, I wanted to encourage you all to check our website, which is right there. That's the address. And we have a very lovely YouTube channel with a bunch of talks by very interesting people, Rohit included here, even though he has his hand raised, but I cannot hear his question. And we have some interesting things, such as a recording done at Monash by John Crossley, of a conversation between Stephen Kleene, Mostonskis, and a bunch of other very prominent logicians. So if you have never heard the voice of Kleene, you go to our to our YouTube channel there and listen to the recording and give me more views, because that's always good. Like, subscribe, and all of that. And then I just wanted to say that the next annual conference of the association will be in Melbourne, and it will be hosted by Monash in a sort of hybrid format. And that we also have, furthermore, a journal associated with the organization, which is managed by Ed Meres. And membership in the association is pretty much open. So you just go to a website and subscribe to the email list. There are no fees or anything like that. It's everything is rather anarchic and, you know, very Australian. So please, check it out, and hopefully we will see you in some of the conferences or something like that. And now I give the floor to David. That should be very enjoyable. If there are any questions, all right, yeah. Anyhow, thank you very much.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn now to take on the show. All right. Well, hello to everyone. I'm Valentin Goranko, and I have the honor and pleasure to chair David Makinson's talk. And before that, I am to introduce him. Now, it's very easy to introduce someone like David Makinson because there is a lot to say about him, but at the same time, it's very difficult to do that for exactly the same reason. So let me try. So as you already know, David Makinson is originally Australian, but he actually did his PhD with Michael Dummett at Oxford. And during his professional career of over 60 years, he has been actually all over the world, and that includes Paris, London, Beirut, and back to London, where he has been until recently a guest professor at the Department of Philosophy, Logic, and Scientific Methods at the London School of Economics. But as I understand now, he is a happily retired professor, mostly busy exploring French food and wines, but also doing some logic, as you are about to hear. Now, it's also notable that in between academic jobs, David has also worked as a program specialist at UNESCO for over 20 years. And he is one of the very rare cases that I know of an academic coming back from this stratospheric life of a master of the scientific universe to the much less glamorous academic world. Now, David Makinson is very well known as one of the pioneers of modern model logic, where several classical results bear his name. And these include, inter alia, the classical canonical completeness proof method based on maximal consistent sets. And Makinson has also discovered the first example that I know of a propositional model logic lacking the finite model property. And these are just some examples. So Makinson is probably even more famous with his groundbreaking work on theory change, and in particular on belief revision, where he is the co-author, together with Carlos Ojoron and Peter Jardenfors, of the famous AGM approach. Makinson has also made a number of other important contributions to the theory of uncertain reasoning, as well as to the ontologic of conditional norms, where he developed, together with Leon van der Tore, a new, quite promising approach called input-output logic. Well, I can go on and on presenting David Makinson more, but I'm quite sure that he can do a much better job on that himself. So without further delay and ado, it's my pleasure to pass the virtual floor to David. Over to you. David, just to be sure, do we hear each other?
I hear you. Do you hear me?
Excellent. You know that the floor is yours now. Good.
Okay, but on my screen I have your picture. I don't know.
You have my picture.
Yeah.
Well, I can remove my picture, but if you want to share the screen, just click on share screen, and then if you have several screens, then find the one with your slides and then click on it.
Okay, the one with the slides. Okay, there. Okay. Partager. Okay, is that better? Right.
Now it's better. Yes. Now we see your slides. Maybe you can zoom out to full screen.
Zoom out to full screen.
If you go on view and full screen.
View, zoom,
no,
and entire page. No, zoom. Optimal figures 100%.
There is some combination of control something, but I'm not sure which one it is. If anyone knows, or maybe just click on slide or slideshow.
Slideshow. Yeah, just a minute. Where's slideshow?
This looks like PowerPoint. So if anyone knows,
yeah, it's LibreOffice. LibreOffice.
Oh, right. Okay.
Slideshow. So format. Unfortunately, it's blocked by the other icons for the. Let's see. Can that go away?
Well, from view, you should be able to zoom out. In a way.
Zoom.
You should entire page. Try entire page or optimal view. Or
entire page. It's now on entire page.
You should go to the top, the very, very top of the screen.
Yeah.
Under your browser, under View.
Yeah.
And scroll down from View to full screen.
Full screen.
No,
but you must do that from the browser.
Into your own computer.
Slide to the master slide. So man, what's going on here?
Go to the browser. Go to the browser. Like Chrome or Safari. Right, even further up than that. Beyond that.
Unfortunately, it's covered by the.
It'll pop up as you cursor
video. Discussion, control of distance. It's covered by the, these other things.
It'll pop up if you take your cursor right up to the top of the screen, not the page, the screen. And then if you're in Chrome, you can have View, or if you're in Safari, you can have...
But this will work if he has connected via browser, not directly via Zoom. Are you using a Zoom application or a browser, David?
No, I went from the email link that was sent to me, clicked on that, and then went from that into Zoom direct.
So you have a Zoom application.
It does have the what we can see now. I mean, you can still see the slides.
No slides.
Someone says, please press from the keyboard Control F5.
F5.
One of these magic combinations, or just F5 and pray.
Okay, F5. That's F5. Oh, this is terrible. F5. No, it doesn't seem to do anything. Normal ally slide sorter, edit, view.
Go down to Zoom.
Okay, I'll get down to Zoom.
Yeah, and now you have various options.
Optimal view.
Try this.
No, try 100%.
Okay, I'll try 100%. So I go down to view again, options, Zoom. and try 100%. So I'm 100%.
Maybe 150, I don't know.
Okay, I try again. View, zoom, 200.
Yeah, okay.
Is that too big?
150 is good.
Let's go for 150.
But as I understand, this will only increase the font size, but not will not open the window.
Yeah,
so
that's
maybe clicking on slideshow on top of your application. So maybe try this slideshow.
Okay, just a minute.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah. I've got to go all the way back, I think. So where are we?
Of suggestions on chat. If anyone knows how to solve the problem, unmute yourself and give instructions.
No, this one, LibreOffice, set format.
Why not use the icon in the middle? In the middle on top, there's an icon.
Yeah, but the icons are covered by icons coming from your end, from the participation business.
You can minimize the view on Zoom. You can minimize the gallery view so that it's not in your way. That you can do by just pressing some button there on the view.
In the chat, someone suggests just press Alt and S.
Yeah. That's good.
That looks better. Yep.
Does that fit? Or it's too big?
Looks good to me.
Okay. This I get rid of. Okay. Right, we can begin, I think, right?
Yes.
Let me try and minimize this thing which is in the way. Okay, right. Well, this talk is not about ontology, nor metaphysics, nor philosophical speculation. But it's an attempt to make a diagram which might perhaps help you when you're undertaking activities like that. And I hope that even if it's not ontologically deep, it will at least be some fun. And the general spirit of the talk is illustrated by this quotation, which I've taken from Thomas Le Miesier, a theologian, philosopher of the 13th century, who loved making diagrams. In particular, he made trees, setting them out as what are known as horizontal trees so that they fit more easily on the expensive matter that were pages. And the quotation is this: the reason I have made these figures is that they are visible as a whole and at once. By looking at them, many things are called to the mind at the same time. The figure is caught in the imagination, then led to the memory and to the intellect, and even further to the will. The soul that looks at the figure thus acquires knowledge and delights in it. So let's begin with Frege in 1891, and he wrote a letter to Husserl on the 24th of May of that year. And in the letter he said, among other things, I hope to find some time soon to reply to your objections. All I should like to say about it now is that there seems to be a difference of opinion between us on how a concept word, common name, is related to objects. The following schema should make my view clear. And so in the letter, he put a schema. Now, is that schema visible to those in the audience? I hope it is. Any feedback there?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is Frege's diagram.
Feedback.
Hello?
I say you asked for a feedback.
Yep.
So I'll make just a very brief comment, which is that Frege is not taking into account of the fact that the same syntactic object is going to be seen differently by different people, and then reconciling these different views of the same syntax is what requires us to coordinate our understanding of the same thing. But this is a very important subject, but it's outside your talk, so I will not say any more. Maybe you
Okay, thanks, Rohit. So if we look at this diagram, it prompts quite a few questions. Questions about what's there and questions about what's not there. And so about what's there, one might ask, what's this with the parentheses down in the bottom row? Is there any particular purpose? And that node on the extreme right at the bottom, should that really be there, or is it redundant? And another question about what's there. The diagram shows that the items in the bottom row arise directly from those in the middle row and only indirectly from the top row. Does Frege really mean that? And then there's questions about what's not there. What do these vertical arrows mean? Do they all mean the same thing? Do they mean different things? And what is it? Are there any interesting horizontal connections between the nodes on this diagram? And finally, are there any more items of interest in Frege's ontology that could or should be included in this diagram? So these are the kinds of things I'm going to look at. I'm not going to be looking at the hermeneutics of the interpretation of what is the sense, what is the Bedeutung, etc. I'm interested in the structural relations. And a couple of things I think on what's there can be answered very quickly and easily. The parentheses that he put at the bottom, they're there in the letter. I think they're simply to make it absolutely clear that the arrow that's emanating from there goes from the whole node, not just from the concept word or something like that. It's from the whole node, the Bedeutung of the concept word alias concept. So it's just formatting. Now, what about the node on the extreme right of the bottom row? Well, that looks to me quite redundant, because it's really exactly the same thing that we've got in the node just to the left of the brackets, Bedeutung of the proper name, the object. And it's the object that falls or fails to fall, as the case may be, under the concept. So I see no need whatsoever for this additional item on the right-hand side, and so I'll be omitting it in what follows. That takes us to the, that's just a summary of the questions that I raised. And that takes us to the question of the bottom items. Do they really arise from the items in the middle row? In other words, do the various Bedeutungs or meanings, or as they're sometimes translated, arise from the various senses or from the linguistic or semi-linguistic items in the top row? And here we have a difference between a strict position we find in some of Frege's texts, particularly in the earlier texts, and a more relaxed position that's in some of the later texts. In a manuscript of the early 1890s, he says, thus it is via a sense and only via a sense that a proper name is related to an object. Logic must demand not only of proper names, but also of concept words, that the step from the word to the sense and from the sense to the Bedeutung be determinate beyond doubt. So there he's saying there's two steps, from the word to the sense and from the sense to the Bedeutung. And in 1897, in another manuscript, he says, further, it is clear that we do not, properly speaking, ascribe truth to the series of sounds which constitute a sentence, but to its sense. So that's the strict position. But also in later manuscripts, he takes a more relaxed stance and says, in 1906, proper names are meant to designate objects, and we call the object designated by a proper name Bedeutung. So it's the proper name which designates, not the sense of the proper name, or as well as the sense of the proper name. And in 1914, if I say the thought that 16 minus 2 is a multiple of 7 is true, I am treating true as a property of the thought, whereas it has emerged that the thought is the sense and the true the meaning of the sentence. Of course, treating truth as a property of sentences or of thoughts is, it says is in the translation that I'm working from, but I would say are both. Treating truth as a property of sentences or of thoughts are both in accord with linguistic usage. So we can talk one way or the other. So my interpretation is that Frege has both a formal doctrine and a relaxed way of speaking about the sources of the items in the bottom row of his diagram, the Bedeutung. It would be desirable for an extended diagram to take them both into account. And the obvious way of doing that is by seeing that the relaxed way of speaking is as the composition of two strict ones. So let's go on to the questions about what's not in the diagram and go straight into a completion of Frege's diagram as I would propose it. Now here I'm hoping that everything is visible from the top row, top left judgment sign down to the bottom right extension of concept. I hope it's all visible, and I hope it's not so small that you can't read it. But this definitely needs to be walked through. Let's go slowly, and I'll draw your attention to what's going on in this diagram. First of all, the nodes of the diagram I've written in Roman font, and on the right-hand side, you see some of them are underlined. They are the ones which Frege treats as unsaturated. That won't be a major question in this talk, but I just note it because it is something which is part of his ontology. So the underlined ones, 1, 2, 3 of them there, are he treats as unsaturated. The compositions of arrows are dotted, indicated by dotted lines. There's 3 of them. One going down the second column from the top row down to the truth value, another one going down towards the proper name, Bedeutung of the proper name, the object, and a further one here from the object to the extension of the concept. So they are the compounds, or the compositions rather. The arrows of 1891 in his letter are the thick ones, the 6 thick ones, and they remain unchanged, although the names of the nodes that they go to and from have changed. So there's these 2 here. I don't know whether my cursor is visible. These 2 in the 3rd column, and these 2 in the 4th column, the rightmost column, which are the thick nodes, and they're identical to the disposition in the letter. I've included the judgment sign. I wasn't sure whether to put it in or not. It's not mentioned in the letter, but it does take place in his Begriffsschrift. It's an important role there. So I've put it in, I've bracketed it just to make indicate that it has a rather special position. The plus sign, which you see occurring twice over on the right, that indicates compounding. Now, in the top row, that compounding is just syntactic. In the second row, it is perhaps more complex because these are not syntactic items. And that leads us to look at the arrows consist of. And there, the convention I've adopted in order to minimize bracketing and fiddling around is that the source of the consists of arrows, there are 1, 2, 3 of them. The source is the node immediately to the left. So, for example, the thought, the sense of the proposition, consists of what's on the right, and it's the compound on the right, which is the target of the consists of node. So the sense of the thought consists of the sense of the proper name, together with, compounded with, in some sense of the term, the sense of the concept word. And likewise, down in the bottom left, I've put a bendy arrow from judgment to assertion. I could have just taken it straight up from judgment to assertion, but this is to emphasize the fact that although the source, the judgment consists of, what does it consist of? Not just the assertion, but the assertion, which is expressed by the judgment sign above, together with the sense of the proposition. And what else? Tu peux prendre ça ailleurs, s'il te plaît? Ouais, merci. Tu peux le fermer. So what else? Denotes, right, in the 2 rightmost vertical columns, the syntactic items on the top row express the sentence underneath them, which denote, I've just chosen one of the words which occur in various translations of Frege, denote the Bedeutung in each case, and then the composition of these 2 relations from the syntactic note at the bottom, I've called refers to just choosing another one of the words which occurs in Frege without any particular stress on the choice of word. The Bedeutung of the proper name is an argument of the Bedeutung of the concept word, because the latter is conceived of as a function, and that Bedeutung of the concept word determines the extension of the concept, and of course the object belongs to or fails to belong to the extension of the concept. So that takes you through what I see as a reasonable kind of extension of, or perhaps rather arrogantly, completion of Frege's diagram for its ontology. I've gone the wrong way. So that's just summarizing what I've been saying. Sorry, I think I have to plug in to give some electricity to my computer. Right, now it's good. And let's continue to the next. And how would we compare that with the ontology we see in plain, ordinary, current, first order logic? Well, there we have a diagram which I think reasonably well symbolizes the ontology that's involved. Let's walk through that one again as well. So in the top row, we have expressions of natural language, for example, English. And in the middle row, expressions of a formally defined language, the formulae of first order logic. In the bottom row, there are purely semantic items, truth value, the domain, subsets of the domain. Remember here that in this diagram, as in the 2 preceding ones, including the first one from Frege, we're concerned only with simple sentences, without any truth functional signs, without any quantifiers, and with just a single one-place predicate and sentences saying that an object or individual has a certain property. The plus sign in the top is for concatenation, And the plus sign with a circle around it is for reverse concatenation. That is to say, normally, in most presentations of first order logic, you write the predicate sign before the constant. So this is of course much simpler than Frege's diagram, and there are quite a number of differences and some similarities. So let me talk a little bit about the differences and the similarities. That's just what I've been saying. And let's look at some of the differences. First of all, it's apparent when you can put the three diagrams side by side, and I wish I could put them side by side on the screen, but I haven't been able to do that. Frege is much less extensionalist than first order logic, as we know it. The non-extensional concept of senses and of concept itself, which are in Frege's diagram, they disappear entirely from figure 3. The notion of the extension of a concept, which is quite absent from Frege's original diagram, which I've introduced because it is in Frege's writings, but has a marginal role. So it's marginal in figure 2, but it takes absolutely center stage in figure 3. So first order logic, its ontology is much more extensionalist. It gets rid of non-extensionalist items and emphasizes, gives center stage to extensional ones. Frege curiously gives a rather lesser role to formal language. Although the diagram was in 1891, that is well after the publication of the Griffschrift, concept script is entirely absent. Formal representation is entirely absent in his own diagram of figure 1, as we'll recall, if you like. And there's nothing of any formal representation there. It's all in terms of informal, and so in the completion of his diagram, I've retained that feature. But in first order logic, of course, we have in the middle row, instead of senses or other intentional objects, we have symbolic expressions of the language of first order logic. And in figure 3, the valuations we give the semantic entities are defined on the symbolic expressions. They don't come out of senses. So there's quite a number of differences. On the other hand, it's interesting to know that Frege's original diagram and the one that I've put there that I see as representing the ontology or the ontological structure of first order logic have a common vertical structure. In each case, there are 3 descending paths, each containing 3 nodes. In the top row, there are syntactic items of one kind or another. In the bottom row, there's semantic items in one kind or another, differing between the two. But in the middle row, that's where the biggest differences arise. For Frege, there are intentional items, and for first order logic, they're replaced by purely syntactical ones of a regimented artificial language. So what's new in all this? Well, the short answer is nothing. But I find it handy to have it laid out in the diagram. And I agree with Le Miesier that the soul finds pleasure in diagrams. So I had a lot of fun playing around with the diagram, particularly number 2, which was quite not as easy to construct as it might look. So it leaves quite a few questions which might occur to you, on which I don't have answers to. Are there aspects of Frege's ontology that my figure 2's so-called completion neglects? Well, I've looked around, I haven't found any, but perhaps there are. How far do these diagrams help understand the content of his ontology? Well, I have to confess, ontology itself is not my cup of tea. I'm interested in structure here. It might be your cup of tea, but I hope perhaps such diagrams might help you when you look at the ontology, if you have the structure at a glance. It's a bit like saying, well, you have an organigram of the administrative structure of an enterprise, but we haven't said anything about who occupies the various posts, just the interrelation between the posts. And there's a much more general question. Can diagrams play a more active role in or around philosophy than they do today? In medieval times, it was just these horizontal tree diagrams, or tree diagrams, usually horizontal, usually for classifications. In logic, personally, I'm a fan of hash diagrams wherever you have partial ordering, which is very common in logic. Trees for branching processes, whether they're syntactic or semantic, where it's also fairly common in logic. Flowcharts, which you don't see much in books of logic, but they are quite nifty when you want to diagram a simple recursive construction that has choices at various nodes. For example, when you want to diagram the recursive construction of a maximal consistent set in the proof of the maxi-consistent proof of completeness of a propositional calculus, a little flowchart is very helpful for students. And of course, tables, which I think of as a form of a diagram, they're very helpful for multiple cases when you want to compare them. Of course, abstract algebra and category theory love arrow diagrams, and they have their place in logic too. But in philosophy, well, one doesn't see much. Perhaps there could be more, perhaps in a formal epistemology. And that's all I want to say. The talk is based on a very short paper that has just recently appeared in the online section of Frege's of Logica Universalis, and there's lots of references to the sources, etc., in that paper. So there, I think I'll stop.
Right. Thank you, David. I invite everyone to unmute yourselves and to give a sound round of applauses for David Makinson. And now I open the discussion. Please, everyone who wants to ask a question or make a point, raise your hand. From the reactions panel, I see one hand which is raised by Rohit, but that was raised right from the beginning. So, Rohit, do you want to book? Yes, go ahead.
Or a statement to make. Namely, from 2 to 4 p.m. New York time, which is to say 8 to 10 p.m. Central time, there is a meeting that takes place, which is 50 years after naming a necessity. And this is very, very relevant to David's talk. I don't know that they want everybody present here, which I see 61 people, to join the Kripke seminar, but I'm sure that some people would be interested, and I have a feeling that they would be interested, because the topic of the Kripke seminar is really very, very close to the talk that David himself gave.
Would you like to share a link with us? And please remind us the time again in Central European.
I don't want me to share a link, but I can I can share a link to the email of the person.
Okay, so anyone interested should email you. Is that right?
Let me see. It's okay. So
all right.
It is Romina Padro.
Okay, so
you can write to her.
Are you done with the statement?
No, I'm sending it text message, and I'm done with my statement. Yes.
Okay, and you don't have a question or anything that justifies your raised hand now? Okay. If not, then I will move to the next hand, which belongs to Alexei. Alexei Moravitsky, I believe. Yeah. Alexei, over to you.
Okay. Well, David, thank you very much for your enjoyable talk, and I'm familiar with this because David sent me a draft of his paper, but the paper doesn't contain the list of questions, and I can easily answer the first question about if your diagram in figure 2 neglects anything. It doesn't neglect the distinction Frege made in, for example, in his paper entitled Thoughts under the general name Logical Investigations. He distinguished sense and thought, which is in the column 2, the same thing, but in other places, not only in this paper, in other places, Frege emphasized the distinction between thought and sense, which is not distinguished in your diagram. And this is a very difficult point, actually, in Frege's ontology. Yeah, that's my comment.
Okay, David, would you like to respond?
Well, thank you, Alexei. I'll have to look into that. And if there's any, specific references to help me doing so, I'd
well, the reference, for example, is his paper entitled Thoughts. Under the general, he published 3 papers: Thoughts, Negation, and one more on the general title Logical Investigations.
Okay.
And all 3 are translated to English.
Okay. Right.
Okay, thank you. Next hand is Colin James III. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Colin,
me?
Go ahead, please. You are muted.
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Let me send a message to everyone, which is my question. It has to do with the example in figure 3. Just a second. Let's try and... Okay, let me send it to everyone. It has to do with the example in 3. There we go. One can use the free modal logic street prover known as mole 1.0 sourcenet at sourceforge.net to verify this. But my question is, why is the example not a tautology? Thank you.
David?
Well, although Frege doesn't give an example in his diagram, I take it to be talking about a simple statement which predicates a property of an object, and I've maintained that right through all 3 diagrams. Now, tautologies come in all shapes and sizes, and all more complex than this particular example. So bringing them in would, I think, change the game enormously. We're looking at the ontology of the basic structure of a sentence. There might be more things to say about the ontology of the truth functional connectives and of the quantifiers, but they were not covered in Frege's letter, and I haven't attempted to cover them either. I'm not sure whether that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next in the queue is Joran Sundholm. Please, Joran.
Thank you. I enjoyed this, David, very much. And as I listened to you, I recalled a paper by Wolfgang Kühne that definitely you should look at, because it contains very similar diagrams to those of yours. Yeah. So say, is this visible anyway at all? I gave the reference to the paper in the chat. So look here, I mean, so that definitely is something to look at in Grazer Philosophische Studien.
David, you are muted.
Sorry, I haven't got into chat yet, but let's see, discussion, is that it? No, it's not under discussion. How do you spell Kühne there?
Kühne, K-U with umlaut, double N-E.
Okay.
And it's a special issue on Bolzano and on Frege. And Mike, it's a long paper, it's a 40-page paper that Kühne gives precisely on these interrelations that you discussed as well.
Well, I must look at that.
And then Michael Dummett comes in and gives a comment on Kühne. So it's a rich volume.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Anyone else who still wants to ask a question or make a comment? The queue is empty at the moment.
Well, since I asked a question before, may I speak?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is that language is essentially a social phenomenon, right? And this is something that is very well recognized in Wittgenstein in the philosophical investigations, right? So the idea that a sentence indicates a proposition and we all understand the proposition well and without taking society into account is simply false, because the same sentence can have different meaning in different languages, and the same sentence can have different meaning to different people. And this is why the work of Grice on implicature and the much more recent work of Robert Stalnaker on cheap talk is very, very important, because I think that language needs to be situated in society. It's not something that sits outside. Perhaps one can say for mathematics it sits outside, but Frege's examples are not all mathematical, and the questions that Saul Kripke, for example, considers are also not all mathematical. So I think language needs to be situated in society, and the workings of society affect language. That's not to say that language is a purely separate phenomenon, need not be considered, because it's a very important mathematical field, and there is no harm in studying it as an independent field. But ultimately, we have to say, in order to use language, we have to take society and we have to take the individual in. Thank you.
David, would you like to respond to this anyhow?
I have a question.
Sorry, who is speaking now?
Sorry, David.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. I mean, yes, it's well taken. It's well taken. Point. My goal is really to try and uncover the structure of what Frege is. What you say is quite. Yeah, one couldn't disagree with it. Yeah.
Of course, David. Thank you.
All right, so I would like to request again, if anyone has a question or a comment, please raise your hands in the reactions panel. Otherwise, I cannot see you easily who you are. And otherwise, please stay muted. So someone indicated to have a question, but I'm not sure who that person is.
Yes, I don't know how in
All right. Okay. Now I see. So it's Anka Pascu. I'm
Yes,
not sure if I'm
yes.
pronouncing your name right.
I
Anka,
don't
please go
know.
ahead.
I know the hand on the screen.
That's
Don't-
fine. I recognize you now. Please go ahead.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
So my question was, why did you put in figure 3, I think to be, the German word Bedeutung? I don't speak German and read German, but in all Frege's papers I read, translated in English or French, Montgomery Farce, Heisenor, there was denotation. There is a slightly difference in the sense of the word Bedeutung in German from the sense in English or French. That's for you put Bedeutung and not denotation. Sense et denotation, sense and denotation. It's just a problem of to dig a little bit the sense of Frege's epistemological thought, because he's very important done he was a mathematician, but he defines a concept. What is a concept? The concept is as a function applied to an object, giving as a result the value of truth, true or false. That is very, very important acquisition from the epistemological point of view, of course, because built a bring between mathematics and language, because mathematic modelization, symbolization, and natural languages and language. Yes, that is.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, let me focus on the first part of the question. Of course, translating Frege is obviously a big problem, and I don't pretend, with my extremely limited German, to venture anything myself. The two main texts that I've been using for the quotations from Frege are his posthumous writings, edited by Hermes and others, published in 1979, and also the Frege Reader by Bini, which published somewhat later, 1997. And in both of these, if I remember rightly, certainly in at least one of them, but I think in both, they prefer to keep the German word Bedeutung rather than have to choose between denotation or reference or meaning or object, etc. And so I've simply, in the translate, I've simply followed them.
But Frege wrote all in German, or he has also writings in English?
No, he wrote entirely in German.
In German. And his letters to Russell, to Bertrand Russell, were in German. Also,
that I think so, yes. Certainly his letter to Russell was, yes. But to Russell, I think so as well. But I'd have to double check that.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And the queue of questions is empty again. So last call for questions or comments. And if not, before closing the discussion, I would like to ask a kind of a very light concluding question. David, what is the main message from your completion of Frege's diagram that the logician on the street today can and should take home?
Oh, I suppose that is that when one is discussing a structured subject, whether it be a business firm, an army, or an ideology, or an ontology, or a metaphysics, as well as content, there is structure. And it can be helpful to try and isolate the structure of what a thinker is doing in relative independence from the content, and separate, so not entirely, but have some kind of separation between the two, and particularly as the structure can be diagrammed and you can see it at a glance and not get lost in what one might otherwise feel is just words bumping together.
All right, thank you. I think these are good words to wrap up the discussion. So I would like to invite again everyone to unmute yourselves and give a round of applause to David for his talk and for the discussion. And with this, I close the discussion, and then I yield back to Katarzyna to complete the event.
Thank you very much, Valentin, and thank to all of you, especially our chair, Valentin Goranko, Guillermo Badia, and of course, Professor Makinson. It was great talk. Thank you for all the questions. And please stay tuned for the next webinar. And I'm very sorry for some technical problems, but I think it was still very, very interesting and great webinar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.